Alright, let's see how much trouble we can get into today. That's off, that's off, that's off, that's on. I think we're ready to go. Are we ready to go? We're ready to go. So let's go ahead and get this started. Hello! Shadowcat back! And I know it's been a while since we had a lecture here, but I'm going to try to start tackling something that I've been thinking about for a very long time. And it's something that I've been thinking about going so far back as the very first direct message that I did on this channel. And the very first one I did was on the concept of law. And the reason why I did the very first direct message on that is because I found that many people had a misunderstanding of the idea of what law was and what law meant. Because the whole crux of the argument was that people tend to see the law as being this, like, solid, immutable obstacle in front of you. Like the idea that we put these laws in place because you cannot do them, okay? It's like we have laws against theft. You cannot steal. I mean, if you steal, then your life is over. You'll be punished. There are things that will happen to you, okay? You cannot steal. We have laws against murder. We have laws against many things, and these are things that you cannot do. But unfortunately, we don't live in a world where simply making a law means that you cannot do something. It just means that if you do it, and if we catch you doing it, we're going to punish you afterwards. And sometimes, not even then. I mean, especially if you look at how things are going right now. So I needed to make the video on law to explain to people what law is, the difference between things like natural law or sociological laws, things of that nature, and this idea that laws are a completely abstract and esoteric subject. There is no law that you can pass that will actually stop somebody from doing something. You can post a no trespassing sign. You can post a do not enter sign. You can make laws against trespassing and burglary. But none of those will actually stop people from doing things. Because they're just ideas. They're just concepts. Laws, as they exist, as we know them, are just an agreement. We all agree that we're going to abide by certain rules and that we're not going to do these things of our own volition. And this is seemingly something that a lot of normal people have a hard time understanding, which is why I felt the need to go through and actually explain it. There is no law that can ever keep you safe. This is one of the reasons why people are so very, very adamant about things like self-defense. Because for every law that says you cannot be robbed or mugged or assaulted, and for every law that says that, you know, we're not going to allow knives, we do not allow swords, we don't allow axes or hammers, we don't allow pistols, rifles, assault weapons, anything like that. The laws don't actually stop these things from happening. What does stop them from happening? Being able to actually defend yourself. Similar to how we can have all the laws against trespassing and burglary, and we can put up signs and posts and everything else. What actually stops trespassing and burglary? A gate. A fence. A wall. A door. A window. Locks. These things actually stop people from trespassing or burglarizing your home. And so it's a concept that a lot of people struggle to understand, And when they do understand it, it usually triggers a rather radical shift in how they think about things and how they see the world. Which brings me to the subject of today. Today I want to talk about the idea of hypocrisy. I want to talk about what it is, what we understand it to be, and how it is misapplied and misunderstood in today's society. So before I do that, let's look at the chat. I see that Blizzard Star is in the chat. Hello, good to see you here. I think you're the only one here right now, which, is fine. We're not talking like current events, or well, we'll touch on current events, but we're talking about pretty heady subjects today, so I do not expect to draw a big crowd. But that's fine, because part of it is to educate people. Part of this is also just to get, my words down on digital paper and say, I did my part, okay? Nobody can accuse me of not doing anything. I tried. Yes, I am that much of an egotist. So, without further ado, why don't we get into it? Now, the first thing that we're going to go into is definitions. Now, I simply went to ChatGPT, and I asked ChatGPT to give me 10 definitions of hypocrisy, and then to take those 10 definitions and summarize them. And before we get into the definitions themselves, I see that Tux is in the chat. Hello, Tux. Good to see you here. Always a good day when you're here. So again, I asked ChatGPT to give me 10 definitions of hypocrisy, and this is what it gave me. And I'm going to leave these up here for most of the stream. We will be using something or going into other examples, but we're going to go into this. So, just to go through them really quickly. Number 1, the practice of claiming to have moral standards or beliefs to which one's own behavior does not conform, or in other words, to rather be pretentious. Number 2, the pretense of having virtues, principles, or beliefs that one does not actually possess. And that's a really good one because we're going to come to that later. That one right there, even though it's the shortest one on the list, that one right there is good. The act or instance of pretending to have qualities or beliefs that one does not actually possess. The practice of professing beliefs, feelings, and virtues that one does not actually hold or possess to be false. The false profession of desirable or publicly approved qualities, beliefs, or feelings, especially a pretense of having those virtues or moral principles. The pretense of possessing virtues, beliefs, principles that one does not actually have or follow. The act or instance of hypocrisy, such as pretending to be something one is not, or pretending to believe something one does not. So, like pretending that I'm a professional YouTuber when I'm absolutely not. The behavior of pretending to be morally or ethically upright while behaving in a contrary manner. The act of pretending to be morally or socially correct or virtuous while behaving in a way that contradicts those claims. We will get into that one too. Or the last one, the practice of professing beliefs, attitudes, or principles that one does not actually hold or follow. That one too we're going to get into. And so I said, could you just summarize all these? And it said, absolutely. Hypocrisy can be summarized as the practice of claiming to have moral standards or beliefs to which one's own behavior does not conform. Which I do believe is a very, very good definition, and we're going to get into it. So, now that we've got a foundation here, now that we understand the word that we're talking about, I want to get into why I'm having this conversation. And the reason why we're even having this conversation today is because hypocrisy it's become a bit of a problem. And it's not so much a problem in that we're seeing more and more of it, although this is true. The problem that I see with hypocrisy is that many people I hear calling out the hypocrites. And I hear many of us in life are actually very familiar with hypocrisy, particularly if you tend to be more religious. See, when it comes to your average, normal, secular person in whatever country you happen to be, it's really no big deal, because when it comes to having your own secular values, they tend to be a lot more personal and a lot less concrete. So to accuse somebody of being a hypocrite, you would first have to have some kind of strong moral values or principles which you can then be hypocritical towards. Hence why you tend to see this more in a religious setting. Because when it comes to a religious setting, when it comes to religion as a whole, and it doesn't matter which religion you're referencing, every religion has a certain set of dogma that you are supposed to follow. It has built-in principles, values, directions, practices, all of these things that you are supposed to do to both show that you are faithful to whatever religion it is and to run your life. Presumably for a very good reason. I've gone into those reasons on this channel before, but I have talked about the idea that, me being an atheist, believe that we need to have religion because religion is actually a very good way to live. Even if there is no higher power out there, we need to have some kind of structure to society if we want that society to grow. And so hypocrisy becomes a very big deal, because if we assume that we need a societal structure to grow by, but nobody's actually following it, then it may as well not exist. Much like, as I stated in the beginning, laws. Laws seem like an absolutely wonderful thing, but if we all cease to believe that laws have any power, they have no power. If we cease to enforce laws, they cease to exist. Laws are not unlike God, in that if we believe that God is some kind of human construct, the moment that we cease to believe in it, it simply disappears. So hypocrisy has always been a very bad thing. As a matter of fact, we have words for that. In religious circles, there are some words that are very important. One of them is heresy. And the idea of heresy is to believe something that is either not in line with whatever the dominant religion is, or whatever your religion is supposed to be, or to, let's see, did I just say believe something else? No, it's to believe something else or not have any belief at all, okay? So if you believe in something else or you have no belief at all, you are a heretic. If you speak and your words are not in line with your faith, or you are directly offensive to that faith, that is blasphemy. And if you were a part of the faith and you cease to be a part of the faith by your own volition, you are an apostate. These are all very important words, and they're words that we want to keep in mind, because we can do all of these things. I can continue to practice whatever I want while claiming to be a part of whatever religion is there. I can also speak in whatever manner I want while claiming to be a part of a religion, or I can simply cease to follow any and all practices while still claiming to be a part of that. And that is going to insinuate one of two things. Number one, I'm being a hypocrite. I claim to be a part of this thing, although I'm not actually doing any of it. Or I actually do believe I am a part of the thing, but I do not actually practice what my beliefs would tell me that I'm supposed to be doing. The other alternative is I'm simply just lying about it. And that second alternative is going to be a very big point of today's discussion. But this idea that we can claim one thing while doing another, it's going to be a really big part of today's discussion, and I think it's where we should get to right now. So, I do believe that most people have some idea of what hypocrisy is like from their own personal lives, because it's not usually hard to find examples. We are human, we are flawed, and we are hypocrites. Everybody is a hypocrite at some point in their life. Okay? Even the most devout followers of whatever religion have been a hypocrite at some point in their life, and they have done penance for it. For the vast majority of us, we have probably been hypocrites many times. We have all been caught judging somebody for doing something that we either do or should be doing, or, whatever. We've all done it. It is a universal human experience. That being said, though, there are some instances where it is more blatant, more obvious, and more insidious than others. So why don't we go ahead and get into that? And let's cross our fingers and hope that I have this set up right. Otherwise, it's going to be very awkward. So let's bring up our browser here. Means I need to move that down, and this comes in now. Perfect. Well, less than perfect. Let's bring this down. Okay. So, from the Encyclopedia Britannica, I figured starting off with more definitions might be a good place to start. And we're going to start with NIMBY. Okay? And full disclosure, NIMBY is actually only a word that I learned a couple of years ago. I'd heard it before, but I had never actually understood the meaning of it. So, we all learn. But NIMBY is a term that has been around for a long time now, actually. And if you're not familiar with the word, it is an acronym. It stands for, follow it with me, not in my backyard. Not in my backyard. And the idea came about when people were talking about particularly environmental issues. I mean, there are other instances where it came in, and we will talk about them in brief. But the idea was this. You had, in particular with the environmental movement, a lot of people that kept saying, you know what we need? We need to get off of things like fossil fuels, okay? We need to get off of fossil fuels. And so we need to get off of coal, we need to get off of oil, we need to get off of gas, we need to get off of anything that burns, okay? No more burning stuff. We need to go green. We need to go with things like wind turbines or geothermal, or, the really scary things like nuclear. Because technically, uranium's not on fire, therefore it's not burning. That makes it good. And, I mean, some of this is actually really good advice. We should be using more green energy. I don't think we should be replacing our current energy with it, but we should absolutely be augmenting our power grid with as much energy production as we can. Yes, build more windmills, build more solar panels, build more nuclear reactors. It all helps. And then, if we ever get to the point where we're outpacing things like coal and gas and oil by a certain amount, we can start turning them off then. But for now, we should just be adding to it, adding all of it. But the point is, you had a lot of people that were saying, we should have more wind turbines. It's like, okay, a wind turbine. You realize those things are like really big, right? And it's like, they are really big. Where are we going to put it? And suddenly the discussion is, well, we should put it somewhere, just not anywhere that I can see it. Like, we don't want to have the, we don't have a windmill on top of that hill, because I look at that hill, it's out my front window. I don't want to see a great big, windmill up there. Why would I want that? Solar panels? Well, we gotta have places to put those, so are we going to, replace a housing division with a field of solar panels? Are we going to cut down a forest and lay down a field of solar panels? And they're like, no, because I don't want to have that, near me. I don't want to have to drive by that on my way to work. All right. No more no windmills, no solar. What about a nuclear plant? Because there's actually a place that we could put a nuclear plant right here in your town. Oh, no, we can't put it there. I mean, that's only like 5 miles away from where I live. NIMBY, not in my backyard. They want all the things, but they don't actually want to be affected by those things. And it's come to be somewhat of an insult to call somebody NIMBY or NIMBYist, because it is an insult. It's people who have this pretense of wanting to save the world, of wanting to better the environment, but they don't actually want to do anything to better the environment. It is a form of hypocrisy. It's a facade. It's a lie. They don't actually care that much about the environment. They care about their own self-image. And this has extended to a certain amount, especially in modern times, particularly in the West, with the immigration problems. It started off with things like, nuclear reactors and windmills with the environmental movement, but now we have these sanctuary city issues where you had many cities, particularly in the further northern latitudes in the US, in Canada, in Britain, and even somewhat in like the Scandinavian nations, where they said, you know what, we should absolutely have sanctuaries for all people who want to come, knowing full well that, when people would be coming through the borders of their respective countries, they'd be coming through the southern borders. And what happened as soon as people started to actually migrate to higher and higher latitudes, when they got to these actual sanctuary cities, they found out that, hold on, we don't actually like this. We didn't expect them to come here. We thought they would all stay down there. We see this in places like New York. We see this in places like Chicago. We see this in places like Portland or Seattle. All these big cities that claimed to be sanctuary cities, and now they've actually gotten a whole bunch of people in them, and they don't want them anymore. It is a show of utter hypocrisy that they would claim to want all these things, and they're just not interested in doing any of them. Which is a good segue to another good example, and that being the border crisis, particularly in the US, but this also applies to other nations. And in particular to the President of the United States right now anyway, or exclusively. Because while it is the job of every leader to take care of their country and to manage their security, in the US, the federal or the international border that we have is under the exclusive purview of the federal government and under the executive of that government specifically. It is called the executive for a reason. They execute the law. Congress makes the laws. They actually sit down, hammer out the details, write it down, and then they pass it off. If there's a question about that, the court interprets the law, saying, what is the meaning and application of the law? However, the president, the vice president, and their cabinet are the executives. They are the ones who actually enforce the law. And so, if the idea of enforcing the border comes down to literally anybody, any one person, it would be the President of the United States, and to that end, the Prime Minister of Canada, the Prime Minister of the UK. I don't know what Sweden has. Do they have a king still? I don't even know. The point is, it falls onto them to do so. And so what we have seen is a complete failure on literally all of the leaders' parts to actually maintain and enforce their borders. And this has come with a whole host of other problems that I'm not going to get into. It is not the focus of today's discussion. But the point is, it is their job. And they are failing at their job. So it does beg the question, though, of if they're failing their job, why? Is this a matter of incompetence? After all, let's use Hamlin's razor. Let's not attribute to malice that which can be best explained by incompetence. Okay? So let's try to establish, is this a matter of incompetence? Well, is Joe Biden, and I'm going to speak to Joe Biden in particular, but you can also think about your leaders as well. Is Joe Biden incompetent? Yeah, I think we can safely assume that one. I mean, if anybody's actually seen him speak, yeah, he's not there. Even the people that voted for him are just like, yeah, he's brain dead. Okay, so we can establish that Biden is at least he's out to lunch. But what about the rest of them? Because the president is not the entirety of the executive branch. What about the vice president? Is she incompetent? There are people who would argue it. However, I would argue that no, she's not. She is clear. She is salient. She can speak. She can think. No, I'd say that she's not incompetent. What about the rest of the cabinet? I don't actually know all the people in the cabinet. However, I'm going to presume that it is filled with people that they know what they're doing. Okay? They go into work every day. They understand their job. I don't think that we can really write them off as incompetent. So, if we use Hamlin's razor, we attribute not to malice that which can be excused by incompetence. Well, it doesn't seem like we have any incompetence here to excuse it. Which means that it must be done intentional. And if it's being done intentional, again, we have to ask the question of why. And Tuxedo says, I'm kind of done with that razor. Things have gotten to an extreme point that no sane person would be screwing things up like they are. Too many lies, too much, well, hypocrisy. We're going to get into that. And we may as well get into that right now since you brought it up. So, as we just established, we cannot excuse this through any kind of incompetence. So it must be done intentionally, it must be malicious. But that also, it begs the question of why. Why would they maliciously be doing something that harms the country? And we get back to this idea of, like I said before, the religious hypocrisy. Like, let's take a really kind of mild example, okay? Let's say that you are a Jew, okay? Part of following Jewish tradition is that you are only supposed to eat kosher. Yes, I had to think about the word there for a minute. But you're only supposed to eat kosher. Now, eating kosher is not terribly hard. There's not a whole lot of food there that's on the not approved list, but one of those things is bacon. Who loves bacon? Do you love bacon? Let me know in the chat if you love bacon. I'll be honest with you, I'm not a huge bacon person, but even so, I like a good piece of bacon every once in a while. I just don't eat a whole lot of it. Bacon is tasty. So, what if you are a what if you are a Jew and you decide that you're going to eat bacon? Bacon, tasty. Actually, you know what? Before I go through with this, I want to tell a story. It's not my story. It's my grandfather's story. But I want to tell the story because my grandfather, when he was growing up, he did a lot of different jobs. One of them, I think he was doing like a construction project, and I don't remember where it was. He was just he was working a construction project, and this was in city somewhere. Again, I couldn't tell you where, but he's there. He's working with a friend. He's working with a crew, but he's also working there with one of his friends. And so it's halfway through the day. They're like, "All right, let's go ahead. We'll stop for lunch." So they all put down their tools. They all stop for lunch. and they take their packed lunch and they go to find somewhere to sit to eat. So he and his friend, they walk across the street. Across the street is a temple. And they just say, you know what? It's the middle of the day. There's not going to be anyone in there. So they walk in, they sit down at the back of the temple, and they're just like, we're just going to sit here and we're going to have lunch. And while they're sitting there, you know, they're keeping quiet. They don't want to disturb anything, but they're just having their lunch. They're talking. The rabbi walks in. And the rabbi walks in. He looks over. He sees the two guys that are there having lunch. He waves. It's like, hey, guys, how you doing? They're just like, hey, rabbi. And the rabbi looks over and it's like, what's for lunch? And the words leaving his mouth before his brain could even catch up to him, it's like, it's a ham and cheese sandwich. And the rabbi just stops and looks at him and it's like, oi, now I'm going to have to re-bless the whole thing. I gotta go through and clean the chairs and all this. I gotta say prayers and all this. How about this? You don't tell anyone. I won't tell anyone. God won't tell anyone. And they all laughed about it and they moved on. Okay? Now, is this a case of hypocrisy? Technically, yes. Is it a serious issue though? No. Why? Because we all understand this is harmless. They're not practicing Jews. They're not violating anything. Technically speaking, there is no rule about having bacon or ham inside of a synagogue, so no rules technically broken there. It was just kind of a funny moment. Now, if they had been Jewish and doing that, that would have been a much bigger problem, because now you gotta ask, it's like, number one, why are you eating it in the first place? Number two, why are you eating it here of all places? And it really begs the question of, why are you doing these things when you profess that you firmly believe in not doing those things? Now, in the case of this, it's a ham sandwich. We all laugh about it and go on with our day. And it's a good story. It's a funny story. I love that story. In the case of how we're treating our southern border, however, on the governmental level, that is not funny. And it really begs the question of, if you're doing this, one of two things has got to be true. Number one is that you are a government agent, okay? You firmly believe in this country, okay? You took the oath, you believed the oath, you have tried to execute the office to the best of your ability. But for some reason, you are flooding the country with an open border, which just defies all logic. Why would you be doing this thing? It would be absolutely hypocritical to your entire station. And this is actually the reason why I'm having this discussion today, is because I've heard this argument. This is a real argument that I have heard over and over and over again. It's like, this is hypocrisy. Actually, I've heard it more as treason. People have tried to say it's treason to do this, and I'm like, well, no. Treason is aiding and abetting an enemy of the United States. Or, technically whatever country you happen to be in. But it's aiding and abetting your enemies. That's treason. This is not an act of war, okay? So it's not treason. It is sedition. Okay? It is an act taken directly against the country. So, sedition? Absolutely. Why would you be committing an act of sedition, though, when you are sworn to uphold and defend the law and the Constitution of the United States? Well, it could very well be hypocrisy. It could also be something else, and that is a lie. And this is one of the things that I have tried really hard to explain to people, and I have done it so very, very many times. Oh, I just noticed this is misaligned. Can I fix it? Can I fix it? No, I don't want to do that. Nope, I guess I can't fix it. Oh well. Now my OCD is going to be going absolutely crazy. Anyway, though. The other option is that it's a lie. That when they took the oath, they never actually meant it, okay? They lied. They never took the oath. They were never intending to uphold the oath of office. They were never going to defend the Constitution of the United States. They were never going to defend the law in the first place. Why? Because they don't believe it. And they never did. I have literally explained it to people as they are not American. Okay? They're not. And I know that this is something that's been bandied about. People have been saying, oh, well, if you don't agree with this thing, then you're not an American. Okay? If you don't believe in things like the Patriot Act, you're not American because you sided with the terrorists. No, I'm not talking about that. What I am talking about is the idea that we as Americans in this country, and this is specific to us, but, you know, you as Canadians, you have your own documents. If you're from the UK, you have your own documents there. If you're from Germany, France, whatever. We have founding documents for our country that we believe in. I've gone over them. And I have gone over in detail how the current administration has violated basically every single amendment, well, every single right in the Bill of Rights and every single amendment thereafter. We believe in this document. We believe in these federal laws. We believe in things like border laws. We believe in citizenship. We believe in all of these things that have classically made up what our country is. They do not. Okay? This is the equivalent of being a God-fearing, God-serving Christian, where you go to church every week, you say your prayers every day, you have gone through all the ceremonies, you have gone through your communion, your confirmation, all of that, okay? You have done everything. However, the people that are sitting in the pews next to you, okay, those guys over there, they only come to church maybe once a year, twice a year, you know, like Easter, Christmas, that's about it. You know that they do not pray. You know that they engage in practices that would be considered sinful. Why? Because they do it, you know, out in the open. Maybe they indulge to excess. Maybe they blaspheme. Maybe they do all of these things. You can see that by their actions, they are not Christian. Okay? In every single way but name, they are not Christian. And if in every single way but name they are not Christian, then simply adopting the name does not suddenly make them a Christian. In the same way that simply because we make trespassing a law does not stop people from doing it. To be a Christian, you must actually practice. To stop people from trespassing, you need a fence. And to be an American, or for that matter, whatever country you happen to be listening from, I know I have at least one person here from Canada, you actually have to abide by your nation's founding documents and uphold your nation's values, which includes your nation's identity. If you're not doing that, or even more so, if you are actively working against that, it is not actually a matter of hypocrisy. It is just a matter of straight up lying. because they're not violating any of their own beliefs. They're not violating any of their own tenets, any of their own principles or virtues. They are actually remaining true to all of their virtues and principles. Okay? They are following everything to the letter. It's just not your letter, because they're not one of you. To go back to the religious analogy and make it better, this would be like if I were to take a Muslim and put them into a church. Okay? So they don't actually sit in the pew, they actually sit on a rug. They don't put their hands together to pray, they actually kneel that way. And they don't actually listen to what the pastor says because they only follow a call to prayer 3 times a day. Okay? They're not one of you. They follow something completely different. And you can say, well, you're doing it wrong. You can sit there and say, you're doing it wrong. You're a bad Christian. But no, they're not a bad Christian because they're not a Christian. And this is the biggest problem that I see in this whole thing. It is the assumption that everyone has to be like you. We assume, and the reason why we assume this is because most of us have grown up in a society that was more or less cohesive. One of the weird arguments that I've heard is, depending on how old you are, and I am 38 years old, which means that I was born in 1986. I grew up, and mind you, I don't have a whole lot of memories from back then, but I grew up during the original, what was it? It was, who was it? It was Clinton versus... Who was Clinton up against? I don't actually remember who he was up against, but I remember that one. I do remember a little bit about that election. I remember the Clinton elections. I remember Bush versus Gore. And then it was Bush versus... Who was it? Was it Bush versus Gore both times? I don't think it was. But either way, I remember that. And one of the things that I remember, and one of the things that people comment on, was the idea that when it came to political debate once upon a time, political debates were usually about taxes. Should we raise taxes or should we lower taxes? Should we raise corporate taxes or should we raise, all taxes? Where should those taxes be going? Should we be working on infrastructure? Should we be working on education? Should we be focusing more on things like industrial production? Should we be focusing more on things like research and development? These were all things that dovetailed together nicely because they were all ways for our nation to advance. Okay? They're all roads that lead to basically the same direction. No matter what we do, we're going to become a better, stronger, more prosperous nation. The question is just, which direction should we go? Why? Well, because if we go the industrial route, we're really going to be supporting the blue-collar workers of the United States. If we go more the research and development aspect, we're going to be focusing more on the white-collar sectors. It was those kind of things that happened. And you may be old enough to actually remember some debates like that. But compare that to where we are now, where we have actually devolved into this idea that we don't just differ in opinion. The other side is blatantly evil. That the other side does not just want a different direction, they want a direction that is so completely antithetical to what you are doing that it would actually result, or it could only come as a result to them destroying your side. As in, whatever they want to do, it cannot happen so long as you continue to exist. Not that I really want to get into, like, news, but just yesterday, from the time that this is being broadcast, the Trump trial in New York is going on, and a man immolated himself in front of the courthouse. I don't actually know what his condition is, or even if he's still alive. I don't think he is. I don't have any proof of that, but I don't think he is, given what I heard about his injuries. And if he is alive, I guarantee you he wishes he wasn't. But more than likely, he's probably not. However, the point of this was, the man had left a manifesto behind, and when people looked into it and they looked into what kind of person he was, it turned out that the man was a raving anti-government leftist. And the reason why he did it was as a form of protest, because he swore that if the conservatives ever take power again, it will mean the rise of a new fascist regime. And when I say fascist regime, I need you to think of 1930s Germany. If the conservatives ever take power in the US again, it will result in a new fascist regime that will begin the mass extermination of all of those who oppose them. Now, in light of that, you can really do whatever you want, but this is where we are right now. This is how bifurcated everything has become. There is no more unified country. We are not all Americans anymore. And we can tell that because there are people who still believe in the founding documents and people who have outright called for those founding documents to be abolished. Those people who have called for those founding documents to be abolished are not suddenly hypocrites, okay? They are not being false to their own beliefs and their own practices. And also, the people that are openly calling for this are not lying either. They're very proud of what they say. They are very proud that they are revolutionaries, that they are a new people. And they want to take over the country and establish a new nation in its place. We're not talking about those people. Those people are a completely different conversation. What we are talking about today are the people who profess to be Americans, who profess to love the country, but who are taking actions that directly harm it. And this idea that they are not actually hypocrites. They are the other. They are literally another faction entirely. They are revolutionaries. But they do put on a good facade, and they pretend. To that end, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on it. I do want to go into the New York case, because this is a very interesting case, and I will explain why. I'm not going to get into the details about it, but a couple of things that I do want to cover about this, and then I'm going to get into something a little bit more personal. So before we get into that, we'll cover this. Now, in case you don't know what this case is, I will give you a very, very quick rundown. When Donald Trump was campaigning for president the first time, he had a previous relationship of some kind with a porn star, prostitute, something like that, named Stormy Daniels. And when he was campaigning, and he was a very public face at that point, she had come forward and said, yeah, I want things. I want money. I want. And if I don't get the things that I want, I'm going to go ahead and come public with everything that I know about him, everything that we've done together, and it's really the kind of thing that you do not want if you're going to be campaigning for president. And what's being accused is that he misused campaign finances to pay off whatever she is. I'm not even sure what her profession is, but that he used campaign finances to pay her off, and that's a campaign finance violation. Okay? That is the whole crux of this. Now, where does this get interesting? It gets interesting because under any other circumstance, this would be considered a misdemeanor of sorts, okay? It's not the kind of thing that would get jail time. It's that you used your money wrong, so we're going to fine you and take some of your money away. All right? That's the punishment for this. The what is it? The Department of Justice, that's it. The DOJ, the Department of Justice, has been aware of this for years, obviously, because it's been going on ever since he was running for president the first time. Then, of course, there was his presidency, and then this presidency. It's been out there for a while. The Department of Justice declined to actually prosecute this because they said, look, there's nothing here. Okay, this is not a case. If we thought that we needed to find him, we would find him, but there's nothing for us to do this over. We can't prove it, and we can't hold him accountable for it if it's true or not. Other courts have also similarly turned it down. But then we get to New York. And in New York, they have decided they are not just going to prosecute him for it. They're going to prosecute it as a felony with the idea of putting Donald Trump in prison for decades over this. Not only are they charging this as a felony, but they are charging this as somewhere in the area, I think it was of 30 different felonies, 37 different felonies, I don't remember the exact number, because what they're accusing him of doing is not paying for it with the campaign funds directly, but that his lawyer went through and paid her off, and then, because he was using his campaign funds to pay the retainer for his attorneys, who helped work on his campaign, which would make them campaign employees, that this was an indirect way to use campaign finances to pay off somebody who might be dangerous to his campaign. And for every single payment, and the payments were all automatic, he is getting charged with one felony, which of course then leads up to 30-some felonies. Now, the reason why this is in today's discussion is because a lot of people have pointed out the gross miscarriage of justice here. And it is absolutely a gross miscarriage of justice. There are even leftist newspapers and channels that have said that this is a bad case. Even if they manage to find him guilty of this, the precedent that it will set will open the door to even further lawsuits against people that they really do not want sued. I mean, if they can get Trump on this, they can get pretty much every single person with the last name of Clinton. And if this manages to pass in New York, then all they need to do is to get some very conservative district and judge somewhere else in the country to levy the accusation, to actually file the charges, and then simply or convict them there. Because again, this is a campaign finance issue. That means that it is a federal issue, and a state is charging him for a federal felony. Now, anybody who knows anything about the hierarchy of the government would note that that is backwards. You can't do that. It's not within your jurisdiction. So many people on the left have pointed out that this is a gross miscarriage of justice, that it's not in their jurisdiction, that there's everything wrong with this. But they're still going ahead with it. And again, just like when we talked about the border, just like when I was talking about religion, just when I was talking about law, it asks the question of why. I mean, if it's a bad case, why would you go forward with it? Okay? After all, if you are a district attorney, is it not your job to uphold the law, to prosecute the law? In this case, there is no law here to be prosecuted. So why are we doing it? Well, the answer is very simple. It's because the person doing it, I believe this is Bragg's, I believe this is Allen, something like that, Bragg's case. He is not a district attorney of the United States. As I pointed out, he is a revolutionary. They are all revolutionaries. They are not on the American team, okay? Sure, he is an American citizen. That's what his paperwork says. He lives here, he dresses like us, he walks like us, but he is not one of us. He does not believe in the founding documents. He does not believe in the Constitution of the United States. He does not believe in the Constitution of the state of New York. He does not believe in the federal legal system. He doesn't believe in really any legal system. All he knows is that the legal system is a system with infinite money. It is a system with infinite power, at least to the extent where the government has the monopoly on violence through its police, through its military, through its use of, force. These are all tools that he can use against people. And so when you would look at him and you would say, this is a gross miscarriage of justice and this is a hypocritical action given your position, it is actually not an act of hypocrisy. He is doing exactly what he wants to do, exactly what he believes he should be doing, exactly as he believes he needs to do to uphold what he is trying to create. He does not want this country. He wants his idea of the country. This idea of constitutional protections is an obstacle, much like a fence would be to a trespasser or a burglar, okay? He does not want people to have inalienable rights. I mean, that's the same as a locked window. These are things that are going to get in his way from stopping this person from even running for the presidency. Because he believes that this person should not be allowed to run for the presidency. He believes he has no right to it. He should not even have the chance to do so. And that any means to stop him are justified, so long as it does. If the ends are stopping him from becoming president or ever holding any position of power again, then any means are justified. This is not hypocrisy. These are his values. These are his principles. And just in case it sounds like I am actually picking on people about this, I want to make it clear. I believe that we should accept him for this. Okay? We should accept that he is this person. Afterwards, we can deal with him accordingly, which in this case should be disbarment and imprisonment. But we should not try to dismiss him. When somebody tells you that they are your enemy, you should believe them when they say it. There's no reason not to. Why would we believe it if somebody says, "Hi, I'm a murderer and I'm going to kill you"? Why should we wave that off and just say, "Nah, you're not"? In a high-trust society, yes, you could just laugh that off, because obviously in a high-trust society, We all know that we all agree on the same things, we all believe the same things, we're all very trustworthy because we all follow the same rules. But we don't live in a high trust society anymore. We live in a low trust society. And we can tell it is a low trust society because, well, I mean, think about it. Do you lock your doors? Probably. And why? We all have heard stories from, 40, 50, 60 years ago where people didn't do that. People didn't have to worry about that. Not unless you lived in one of those bad neighborhoods. But suddenly now everywhere is the bad neighborhood. We have gone from being a high trust society to a low trust society. And in a low trust society, ironically enough, you take people at their word when they tell you that they mean you harm. Or if they take actions towards you, you go ahead and just assume that they intend to carry out those actions. Take people at their word and just go ahead and assume that people are not necessarily going to be good people when you first meet them. I hate to put it that way, but unfortunately I kind of have to. It was actually something that I wanted to get into in this discussion, and I didn't think that there would be a reason or a place to really work it in, but this is actually a really great place to work it in. And that was, and as Tuck said earlier, kind of done with the Hamlin's razor, the idea of attributing not to malice that which can be described by incompetence. Hamlin's razor is actually very similar to the golden rule. And the golden rule comes from the Bible. So it is from Matthew, and I wonder if they have it. Yeah, here. Matthew 5:38 through 39. Jesus said, "You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also." The concept of turning the cheek is a difficult one for us to grasp. Allowing a second slap after being slapped once does not come naturally. However, the reason why I pulled this up is because it actually goes into a very good discussion of exactly what does it mean. There's a video here that we are not going to watch. But starting right here, I think. Yeah. So, a word about the slap that Jesus says we should endure. Jesus here speaks of personal slights of any kind. The slap, or the smiting, as the King James Version has it, does not have to involve a literal physical violence. Even in our day, a slap in the face is a metaphor for an unexpected insult or offense. Did someone insult you? Let him, Jesus says. Are you shocked and offended? Don't be, and don't return insult for insult, just turn the other cheek. However, two more paragraphs down, it says, turning the other cheek does not imply pacifism, nor does it mean that we place ourselves or others in danger. Jesus' command to turn the other cheek is simply a command to forego retaliation for personal offenses. He was not setting government foreign policy, and he was not throwing out the judicial system. Crimes can still be prosecuted and wars can still be waged, but the follower of Christ need not defend his personal rights or avenge his honor. Now, this is important because in the discussion of hypocrisy, we have people who actually treat this idea of turning the other cheek as, complete pacifism. That this idea that you need to just let people do as they would and just assume that, that things will be fine, that doesn't work. When we come back to things like this court case, what we see here is an enemy. This is a person who wants to fundamentally change the entire nation and they want to do it for their own personal gain. Because let's just think about this. With all these court cases that are going through, and you've got them like down here. With all these cases that are going through, if we were allowed to actually rewrite all of our laws, all the way down to our Constitution, based upon these court cases, what would we end up with? We would end up with a state that is in absolute power. We would end up with a totalitarian state overnight. Doesn't even matter who's in charge of it. If these cases were allowed to actually go through and pass, then whoever happened to control the state would have unchecked power to do anything. One thing that's not listed down here is the Supreme Court case for Trump, which is arguing that the president cannot be prosecuted after the fact for the actions that he took as president. Which is to say that if the president orders a missile strike against somewhere and people die, that you are not allowed to then come after the president for however many charges of murder for what he did in office. Or in this case, they're accusing Trump of having, done corrupt things in office. And the argument here is actually very simple. They really want to get Trump. But as I had pointed out in previous discussions, they don't think more than one, maybe two steps ahead. If they actually manage to say that Trump can be held legally liable for the things that he did as president, and that we can go through and prosecute him afterwards and even imprison him for the things that he did as president, we will be able to go through and lock up every single president that has ever served in this country. Mind you, there's only like maybe 4 or 5 left. I think Carter's still alive. But we could lock up every single one of them. Why? Because being the president is a dirty job. What this would do is it would actually take the power away from the presidency, away from the executive office, and once you've done that, the legislative branch and the judicial branch don't have any power left. The judicial branch has no power to begin with, which is something that a lot of people are starting to realize, and the legislative branch has no power without an executive branch to actually enforce their laws. What this will do is it will completely reshape the power structure of the government, giving total power to this prosecutorial justice system, and justice I would go ahead and put in big air quotes. Because every single president will be beholden to them. Because if you do not do what they want, then as soon as you're out of the presidency, you can be thrown in prison. And it will be a revolving door. You campaign, you become elected president, you serve your time, they find something that you did in your presidency, and then you go to prison. And that will be the pathway. It will be the president to prison pipeline. I'm trademarking that. Anyway, though, that's what they're trying to do. Now, this is a completely new country that we're talking about. And this is one country where every single other American who believes in who believes in our current form of government, who believes in the Constitution, all of those people would then be the others. And they would all have to be dealt with. And they would have to be dealt with by a legal system where they would have absolutely no right and no representation. This is why when I hear people talk about what's happening and they accuse this of being an act of hypocrisy, I must correct them and say what we are seeing is not, in fact, hypocrisy. This is a very, very intentional action taken by people who are just straight up lying. They are lying about being one of us. And once you realize that they have lied all the way from wherever they started to this position that they've landed in, once you realize that it is a facade, it is a costume that they're wearing, you can peel that veil away and see them for who they really are. And once you see their true face and their true identity, you can treat them as such. Now, this has been a very long tirade on something that I did not want to talk a whole lot about, because this is not the only place, and this next part is going to get a little bit personal, but we're going to go into the more activist side of things. Because all of us can remember back to the wonderful year of 2020, the summer of love, and the sweeping array of mostly peaceful protests where entire city blocks burned down. Because, yeah, mostly peaceful. I could go into a lot of that stuff, but I don't really want to because I want to cover something topical in the news. And because I want to be as unfair as possible, I'm going to Fox News. Because if I had to pick anyone on the internet, any news source that will probably hate furries as much as anyone else, I have to imagine that Fox News is going to hate furries the most. Now, this is personal because obviously I am a furry. And so when this came out, I immediately facepalmed and just said, oh God, not again. But here we go. So, in Utah, and I had to look it up again, but this was in Utah. In Utah, there was a school walkout. Now, school walkouts are not something new. We've been seeing school walkouts for the last 4 years. But there was a school walkout, and it was an elementary school, which got a lot of people's attention because, I mean, why would a whole bunch of kids that are only, 9, 10, 11 years old, why are they walking out of school and protesting? And the reason why they're walking out of school protesting is because of the furries. Now, we're not going to go through the entire article here, but I will touch on some things. So about 75 parents and students at the Mount Nebo Middle High School, it's middle high school, okay, so a little bit older, protested furries on Wednesday, chanting during a walkout that "We the people, not the animals, compelled speech is not free speech, and stop brainwashing us." At the same time, the petition circulated calling out furries. The petition, Students for Humans at School, Not Animals, aka furries, as of Thursday had over 1,800 signatures. Now, why was this happening? Okay, as I said, I am a furry. Everybody in my area knows me as the furry because I will wear an ears and tail when I go out. It's my thing. What's happening, however, is they're saying, please help us in taking care of our children's well-being and safety. Now, why is this a problem? Well, it started off easily enough. Because you had children who came in and they were identifying as furries, and they were wearing things like ears and tails and sometimes a mask, okay? And in many places, furries have become somewhat of a protected class. Not in all places, absolutely, and in some places they will actually target people like that still for lynching. But in many places they have become a protected class because it is considered an identity. I do not wear or live in one of those areas, so, I mean, I take my life into my hands every day. But What the school said is, we want to assure that the rumors circulating online about student behavior are completely untrue. These are 11 and 12-year-old students, and while sometimes these children may come to school with a headband that has ears, sometimes giant bows, sometimes dressed in their favorite athlete, there have been no students wearing masks, animal costumes, or acting like animals. Okay. However, here's what the rumor is. The district added that rumors of biting, licking, costumes, or animal behavior were unfounded. Now, that's what the district is saying. However, what the students are saying is that it's absolutely not. And it doesn't actually say anything in here. Okay, it just repeats the idea of it's rumors of licking and biting. However, I actually listened to the interview, and what the students were saying is that, number one, you had students who would come in and they would wear masks or things like that, and they were the only ones that were allowed to do that. So, of course, you have, childish jealousy. They get to do a thing, but I don't get to do it. And that on its face would be bad enough. They were told that, no, those people are allowed to do that because they have a particular identity. Okay? And I get that. I do. I really do. Because, who wants to be the kid that's told you're not allowed to unless you're going to be like them? But then again, we've also had this going on for a long time. Every single minority group has been able to flex this, saying that, well, I'm allowed to do things because of whatever minority group I happen to be a part of. Society as a whole is getting tired of this whole idea that minorities have a free pass to do whatever they want. Which is where the next part comes in. The students said that it wasn't enough that they were allowed to just, wear masks and things when they came into school. But that they would do things like jump on people, pounce on people, that they would scratch, that they would bite, or that they would even bring spray bottles in and spray people. And the reason why I wanted to bring this up, and why this is in an argument about hypocrisy, is because it's a form of lying. Just like we were talking about in the Trump case, that these people are lying about being American, and they're lying about upholding our current justice system and serving our democracy. And these students are lying about being furries. Now, I know that I literally just said, we should accept people when they tell us what they are. And that is true. But just because they say that they are a furry does not actually mean that they are. There are tens of thousands of furries out there. And we know because every single one of them who has come out has been antagonized for something. I can speak to this personally. But this idea that because they're furries, they are scratching and biting and jumping on people and everything else is to misattribute. These children are not doing this because they're furries. The furries are a scapegoat. The children are doing it because they're assholes. And this is what we've seen throughout every single activist and minority group over the last, call it 10 years. Every single group has gone out and used whatever group they are as some kind of excuse to do bad things. In this case, it's being physically abusive towards other students, saying that, I'm allowed to do this, I'm allowed to behave this way because I happen to identify as a furry. Except that's not true. And there are tens of thousands of furries out there who do not do that. The same way that, when we look at other cultures, when we look at things like BLM, which I'm sure will get me in trouble with YouTube, especially since YouTube has been on a tear lately with cracking down on people. We can look at what BLM did. And they were an activist group. They were the ones saying that, Black people are oppressed. Black people are victimized. Black people are being hunted down and murdered en masse. And we have to go out, we have to stand up for the rights of black people and other minorities. And what did they do? They beat people. They burned down businesses. They took over entire city blocks. They blocked traffic and barred off roads and bridges. To the point where even other black people, and not just other black people, other minorities in general, whether they were black, whether they were Hispanic, whether they were Asian, all of them said, "You do not speak for us." Okay? Most of us, the vast majority of us, don't have these problems. Perhaps the problem is you. And you know what? If your answer to this is to go out and commit vandalism, arson, and assault, I think it's safe to say that yes, the problem is you. So, when we talk about things like hypocrisy, they come out and they say that we have all these problems. Whether we're talking about like police interactions with different races and calling out the supposed hypocrisy within the justice system, or we talk about, in this case, children who are supposedly dressing as furries, literally assaulting and battering other students. It's a lie. They're not doing it because they're furries. They're using the idea of a furry to try and get away with assaulting other people. The same way we've seen other activist groups, not necessarily representing other minorities, but going out, causing damage and destruction, and then using the minority as a shield. You are not an activist. You are not protecting anybody. You are literally a violent, cruel, and evil person who is trying to use other people as your shield. These children need to be dealt with. They need to be treated as any other child would be who assaults other children. Let's see. I've been ignoring my chat. Tux said, I'm all for the left protesting. That was about the guy that set himself on fire, I'm sure. Tux also says, I've seen pouncing and licking and whatnot in furry groups, but they all understand not to do it to uninterested people. Yes, that is true. These are things that are kind of a hallmark in a furry community. But you are right, you don't do it to uninterested people, and this is not the kind of thing that you would do in public either. This is usually something you would do in a private setting with people who are already consenting to being there. It is a consensual act that you're supposed to be doing. Tux says, kids need to learn boundaries and the rules need to be equal for all. Yes, exactly. Which is why I pointed out that the problem here is that it is not that they're furries. The problem is that they are literally assaulting people and then trying to use furries as a way to get away with it. Tux also said, I would imagine as the special privileges dry up, there would suddenly be fewer furries at school, but not none. And that's actually very interesting, because there has been a common... I don't have anything pulled up for this. But that's a very interesting point, and let's talk about that. Because while we are on the topic of hypocrisy, let's talk about the trans movement. Now, don't have anything pulled up for this, so you're just going to have to use your imagination. The idea of a trans person is not a new one. Okay? There have been people who have lived as transvestites or transsexuals forever. Okay? We can go way, way back in history and find mentions of transvestites or transsexuals in cultures around the world. This is not a new phenomenon. Now, way back then, that would be much harder to get away with because, well, because of the harshness of life, you were really, really restricted to whatever role you were in. If you were a man, you needed to be a man to survive. And if you were a woman, you really needed to be a woman if you wanted to survive, which is to say, if you were a man, you needed to be strong, fierce, tough. You needed to be able to work hard, fight hard. And if you were a woman, you needed to be able to provide for a man and to produce children for a man, because a woman alone back then wasn't going to last very long. If the elements didn't get her, any random man could come by and do so. So you really needed the protection of other men. As time went on, as we industrialized, life got easier, we had less things to worry about, that kind of thing has become much easier to do, much more common, and much more acceptable. We can see going back so far as like the 1950s, the 1960s, 70s, all the way up through now, that the idea of being a transsexual, transvestite really kind of took off. But the idea was actually very simple. It was, you didn't necessarily want to live as your own sex. You wanted to live as the other sex. And so what you would do is you would change your behavior, you would change your speaking, you would change your clothes, you would change your appearance, you would try to adopt every single mannerism and appearance that you could to pass as the other sex. And that word right there, pass, is a very, very important one. Because, and I mean, I have known several transsexual people, the idea of passing is paramount. Because the goal is that you want to be able to walk out into public and to be seen as and accepted as the sex that you want to be. Now, this usually starts with first makeup, dressing, hairstyles, things like that. Things that are easy to fake. You can dress the right way, you can exercise, eat right, you can make your body look, while you're wearing clothes, the way that you want to be perceived. And as technology got better, we were even able to go through and surgically alter people so that they would look as the opposite gender naked. Now, it's really the best that we can do, because even with today's technology, there is no way for somebody to actually become the opposite sex. The best we can do is a facsimile. But for a long time, that's all it was. You would try to pass. And if you had passed, you have arrived. You did good. But what have we got now? We have entered into an era where the idea of being transsexual has evolved into just transgender. And the biggest difference between a transsexual and a transgender is that a transsexual wants to be the other sex. Transgender, however, has simply become an identity. And it is an identity that people are allowed to wear whenever they feel like it, to take it off, to put it on, to change it however they feel, without actually putting in any of the effort. And it's in that we see the real hypocrisy coming out. As I stated, when it came to transsexuals, they would have to alter every part of their life. They would have to change the way that they ate. Like, if you are a woman but you wanted to be a man, you might need to put on some weight. You might need to fill out your figure a little bit. There's not too many men that walk around with an hourglass. If you are a man, however, you might actually have to diet, and you might have to do things like wear a corset to help you get that figure that you're really looking for, so you have something feminine. You would have to use makeup to help alter your facial appearance. You have to use things like wigs before you can even get to things like the clothes that you're going to wear, because obviously you can't just throw on the clothes and call it good. You have to fit the clothes properly. There was a significant amount of effort that went into it. And the reason why is because these people deeply believed that they were the opposite sex, and that was what they needed to do to live that life. Compare that to what we see now in the transgender movement, where somebody can simply come out and announce, sometimes changing day to day, that they are simply not just male or female, but whatever gender they happen to believe they are in the moment. Now, why is that? How did we get here? And how we even got to this point is actually very interesting. The idea is this. As I stated, once upon a time, if you were a transsexual, it took a significant amount of work to get there. And to get out there and actually do it was difficult, because one of the things that the left complains about, and the LGBTQ umbrella complains about, is how dangerous it is to be trans. And to their credit, that is actually one thing that was true. If you were a transsexual, particularly if you were a pre-op transsexual, yes, the world was a very, very dangerous place. Particularly if you were a man who was transitioning to a woman. Because let's assume that you are a man transitioning to a woman. Well, that puts you in a rather difficult position. Number one, if you are a man who is transitioning to a woman, because you believe you're a woman, but you have an interest in men. So you are, for all intents and purposes, straight according to your own identity. Well, if you are a pre-op transsexual, and you actually try to attract a straight man, there are cases, and they are not exactly uncommon, where when the man found out that you were a pre-op transsexual, you were killed. Alternately, though, you could go instead for a gay man, and these things happened a lot less. But here's the thing about gay men. Most gay men want to have other men. And so, while they might be a bit happier with you when you got undressed, they're not going to be terribly interested in you while you were dressed, and they're going to be significantly less interested in you if you become a post-op transsexual. So it was actually a very dangerous time. This idea of having a transgender identity and it being safe for you to have that transgender identity was for people who were in the process of transitioning to have some degree of protection while they were in that. So if they were outed, or if they announced that they were going through this, it would be safer for them to do so. That was the goal. However, because we as humans struggle with this concept of moderation, that was taken even further. Suddenly, it was that you didn't even really necessarily need to transition. We could simply just accept you for what you were and celebrate you whether you actually went through the transition or not. And that was a slightly less understandable case, but we could still understand it. You are the person that you are, and so we accept you for who you are. That then turned into, we'll accept you even if you never do it. So, like, you're not even on the path to transitioning, you just said it. Okay? We're going to go ahead and we're going to believe you. Like I said, we're going to take people at their word. And we're just going to go ahead and accept you for what you are, even if you do nothing. However, if you're not going to do anything, if you're not going to actively change anything, it does beg the question of, are you even the thing that you say that you are? Are you actually a transsexual person if you're going to continue to live and act in the same gender that you've always been? And this, of course, then led to people assuming the mantle and thus the protections of transgenderism when it was very clear and obvious that they had absolutely no other identity at all. Much like what we said about the furries, you could simply go out and do whatever, and then you could use the idea of being trans or just being LGBTQ whatever in some way as a shield. So you can't criticize me because I'm a part of this group. You can't punish me for the things that I've said because I'm part of this group. And by the way, if you do come after me, then I have in general an entire army of people who will come to my back because I've identified with this group. These are people who are literally using it as a shield because they can. They were never actually a part of the group to begin with, though. And so when a lot of people say, well, if you're trans, then where's the trans part? I mean, shouldn't you be dressing in a different way? Shouldn't you be acting in a different way? Speaking in a different way? Are you going to get the surgery? I mean, are you doing anything? And if you're not doing anything, isn't that hypocritical? Is it not hypocritical to wear the mantle of this thing when you're not this thing? Well, yes and no, because they're not the thing. It's not hypocrisy so much as they're just lying. Which is something that we have seen in sports now. Because as it continuously progressed, and once it was established that all you need to do is just... all you gotta do is just identify that way, say that, yeah, today I'm feeling female. I guess that means that we can now go join a female sports team. And we've seen the fallout from that too. Where female sports are actually falling apart at this point. I don't think there is a single female sport right now that is actually doing well. Those where they have been less gatekeepy, which, I mean, I guess is a word now. I'm going to go ahead and coin that term. Sports where they have been less gatekeepy have been taken over by men claiming to be women. And even the sports that have been somewhat more gatekeepy have been suffering because of the reputation of it. The idea that, you know, are the women even worth watching anymore? I don't know. Half of the women's sports have been taken over by men, and no one's watching the other half, so where do we go from there? And it's not because they are trans, it's because they know that men and women are different. Men, when it comes to physical activity, tend to be better. And if they were to just simply join a women's sport, they would dominate. And they have been. They have been dominating left and right. I believe it is female swimming that is actually finally going backwards on that now. It was the swimmer Leah Thomas, or I forget what his real name is, because he's now going back to his real name, now that he has been removed from the Women's Swimming League. All of his titles and all of his records have been erased. Because they finally acknowledged that, yeah, he should never have been participating here in the first place, and everything that he did was ill-gotten gains. So the tide is turning a little bit on that, but that's because people are realizing that this is not necessarily hypocrisy, that this is just lying. They are lying to get into these places. They are not actually one of these people. They are simply looking to take. They are looking to advance themselves. They are looking to destroy other things. They are essentially the enemy. And in this case, they're the enemy of sports. So, with that being said, we are running out of time here. We have a little bit of time left. I wanted to talk about something else. One more topic. And this was a video from a YouTuber called Nate the Lawyer. And I'm not going to go into the video just because I wanted the thumbnail. But the thumbnail here is a woke warrior threatens to murder woke Dems on a city council and gets arrested for terrorism. This is what I think is a great example of what they're calling hypocrisy, and in this case it actually is hypocrisy. It actually is a case of hypocrisy, so this is a good example of what hypocrisy really does look like. The case is this. The woman pictured in the thumbnail here is a 28-year-old, I don't know what she is, but she's a 28-year-old woman. Her race doesn't matter. I'm still part of the colorblind generation. I don't care what her race is. The fact is, 28-year-old woman, and she is a pro-Palestine supporter. There's been no shortage of those, or pro-Israel people either. I mean, you're on one side or the other. But the story here is this. The city here, and I don't remember what city it was, but it's in California. They were holding a town hall meeting. So you've got the mayor there, you've got the city council there, the board of trustees, all that. She came up and addressed the city council and told them in no uncertain terms that they do not care about the plight of the Palestinians. And the only reason that they do not care about the plight of the Palestinians is because none of the plight of the Palestinians has any impact on them. And that they should be supporting the Palestinians in what's going on. So, obviously, the way that this changes is that the city council, the mayor, everybody else, if they're going to care about Palestine, they need to have consequences for not doing so. To that end, she addressed them and said, "You are all public figures. We know who you are. We know where you work. And as it shows there in the thumbnail, we will murder all of you." And the city council didn't like that. And so they let her speak her piece. And after her time was up, she went to leave. But it's City Hall. Every single police officer there was at the back of the room ready to arrest her when she got there. She protested, of course, and later on, when she was arraigned, she pleaded not guilty to doing anything wrong. But they arrested her and they're charging her with making terroristic threats. So why is this on here? Well, the reason why this is on here is because this was an absolute, it's California, so this was a blue city. It is a blue city, it is a Democrat mayor, it is a Democrat city council, it's Democrats all across the board. It's California, of course it is. Even the Republicans are Democrats there. But the reason why I bring this up, and this is an actual case of hypocrisy, is because when we look across the country, California has passed no bail laws, New York has passed no bail laws, Chicago has passed no bail laws, Illinois, I think as a whole, has passed some no bail laws. I think New York has as well. It's not just New York City. Many of these places have passed no bail laws because they do not believe in arresting people. They do not believe in holding people. And essentially, they have been extremely lax when it comes to crime. You're allowed to do, in places like New York, basically anything, up to and including murder, and be released. Yes, they have had murderers who have been released. So why does it make this different? Why were there police waiting at the back door for her? And why was she arrested on sight for her words? Not even her actions, her words. It's because this is actually a case of hypocrisy, and which way it cuts, I leave up to you. I don't know. The fact of the matter is this. they are Democrats, and as a whole, and I can't say this is absolute to every person, but as a whole, Democrats believe in lesser jail time, in no bail release, things like that. They do not believe in using the prison system to imprison people because they believe the prison system is bad, which that is an entirely separate thing that we can discuss another time. But what we have here is a case of one ideal, but two actions. So, if they do believe that arresting people does not do any good, especially arresting minorities, which she appears to be some kind of minority, I don't know. If we believe that this is bad, and that the police are bad, and the justice system is bad, and everything else about this is bad, why was she arrested? Why? Why would you bother? At the same time, though, if we're going to arrest people, why did she get arrested, but we're letting literally everybody else go? It's a good question. And if you don't have an answer for that, then it's fine. You're allowed to not have an answer for that. But let's just examine it. And Tuxedo says, well, the lady is supporting terrorists and making terrorist threats. I don't think she's a hypocrite. She's just dumb. Oh, no, absolutely. She's dumb. She's not the hypocrite I'm talking about. Like, sorry if I didn't make that clear. No, she's not the hypocrite I'm talking about. The hypocrites that I'm talking about are the mayor and the city council that was being threatened. Because either they're going to believe that the police work and the justice system works and they're going to arrest her, or they believe that the whole thing doesn't work, in which case they should have let her go. But there's something wrong here. These wires are crossed. This is an actual case of hypocrisy because it's not a matter of what she did was wrong. And I've talked about this with a couple of people already, and every single person, when I've said she did nothing wrong, has looked at me like I have lost my mind. But let me explain. It's not that what she did was wrong by the left's own practices. One of the common phrases the left will use is that there is no such thing as bad tactics, only bad targets. And this is a case of a bad target. Had this been done in a place like Florida, if she had gone into a red city in Florida and threatened to murder the mayor and the city council in just some pick a city in Florida. I don't know Florida that well. I know Tampa and Miami, and that's it. I don't even know what the capital of Florida is. That's probably a bad thing. I should probably review that. Anyway, had she been doing it there and she had been arrested for it, because I guarantee you a state like Florida probably would not have even let her finish her statements. They would have just pulled her off the podium and thrown her into a box. And what would have happened next? You know what would have happened next. It would have been national news. It would have been, wall-to-wall headlines about this city council in Florida that is taking away people's right to free speech. They are afraid of hearing the truth from their own people, their own constituents. They would have been there behind her in force. But that's not what happened. No, instead, she just targeted the wrong people. Because the same people that would have been behind her had she done this in a state like Florida, well, she just threatened them. It is literally a case of a dog biting the hand that feeds it. And as we all know, you never bite the hand that feeds you. Because these people do not actually agree with laws. They will follow the law when it's convenient to them. They will ignore the law when it's convenient to them because they understand what I spoke about in the very beginning of this lecture when I talked about laws and how laws are an abstract, ethereal concept. There's nothing that forces you to follow them except your acceptance of them and your desire to follow them. The left has learned that laws only apply if you let them apply, or if there is somebody there to enforce them. And so they abide by that whenever it suits them, because they just don't believe in laws in general. Until now. Now, when it comes to visit upon them, they say, oh, well, fortunately we have a law for that, and you're going to be arrested. And we're going to put you in a box now. Why? It's not because what we think you did was necessarily wrong. It's just that you're not allowed to do that to us. And this goes right back to what we said in the very beginning. Because I love coming full circle. I love it when I can take an entire lecture and come full circle. We come right back to this idea of not in my backyard. You are allowed to protest, you are allowed to threaten, you are allowed to burn, to assault, to vandalize. You're allowed to do all of these things, but you're not allowed to do it to me. And that right there is hypocrisy. That is what hypocrisy actually looks like. It's not so much that they suddenly felt that laws were important. No, they haven't changed. They still believe that laws are pointless. They don't believe in the city. They don't believe in the state. They don't believe in the country. All they believe in is that you are not allowed to threaten us. You are not allowed to harm us. You're not even allowed to make us uncomfortable. And if you make us uncomfortable, then yeah, we will use the full weight of the justice system to stop you. We will violate every law we have. We will violate every policy. We'll violate every right if it means that we can stop you because you are a threat to me. You're a threat to us. You're a threat to our side, to our party, to our vision. And that is what actual hypocrisy looks like. But do not mistake hypocrisy for having a good person behind it. Do not let hypocrisy become an excuse for the people behind it. Because sometimes hypocrisy is just the admittance of who they actually are. And we can see it on the border. We can see it in New York. We can even see it in children. Sometimes the hypocrisy that you're seeing is just the admittance that they are a bad person and that somebody needs to deal with them. And sometimes they even get dealt with. So, with that being said, I think that's where we're going to wrap things up. I hope that I have given you some kind of a lens that you can use to examine the rest of the world with. Again, that is the purpose of these lectures, is to give you lenses. I mean, think about the that little thing they put in your face when you go to the doctor's office, or specifically the eye doctor. They slap that thing on your face and they say, okay, is it better 1 or 2? 1 or 2? 1 or 2? Okay? Lenses. A whole bunch of them. I want you to have as many lenses as you can to help you observe and dissect the world around you. This should be a good one for you to use. So every single time you're watching the news, look at their actions, look at their words, and determine, is this a person who they're trying to be a good person, but they're failing to follow what they're preaching? Or are they just lying to you and their actions are revealing their true self? there is a reason why we've always said that actions speak louder than words. It's because we can lie. We can lie all day long. But it's a lot harder for our actions to actually back up the lie. So, the next time you're watching the news, think about that. To that end, we're going to go ahead and we're going to take a break here. I think I'm going to be gone next week. No. Maybe? I got to check my schedule. I'm not sure what I'm doing next Saturday, so I'll have to figure out what I'm doing then. I don't know if I'll have a topic. There's other words that I want to go through. Hypocrisy is just a big one right now for me, because I keep hearing it and I keep correcting people, and this is my way to kind of vent that out. And now, the next time I correct somebody, I can just send them this video and say, here, take 2 hours, listen to this, come back and see me. So next week, I don't know what's happening. Maybe a lecture, may not be. Maybe there won't be a stream, maybe there will be. I'll let you know later in the week. Otherwise, though, if you'll be here tomorrow is the tabletop stream. So if you're into tabletop gaming, if you're into Warhammer 40k, you'll want to be there for that. We finished up with Eldar vehicles. We're going to be working on Eldar wraiths. So that should be fun. That's going to be weird. But then again, everything with the Eldar is weird. So, if you like that stuff, make sure you show up then. Otherwise, I will see you whenever I see you. Hopefully it's soon. Subscribe if you haven't done so already. Hit the bell icon. That way you get notified when these videos come out. If you know somebody else who could really use this discussion, share it with them. I mean, if you got them locked up in the car on like a long road trip, play this sucker. Then they have no escape. Otherwise, though, if you just like me, you like what I'm doing, leave a like on the video below. Leave comments either in the chat, in the comment section down below, or join the Discord. You can join the Discord and you can leave comments there directly. You can, get my direct response. You can insult me. You can whatever. Don't care. I'm just a glutton for attention. So, join the Discord. Otherwise, I will see you next time for whatever it is I happen to be doing. And until then, take care.